Hello, I'm Infamous Sphere. What's that? It's time for Infamous Queer!
Pride, 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 darling, darling, pride, pride 95!
It's time once again to talk about lesbian cinema. I've let my general displeasure at the state of the genre be known more than once before, even if it's a little unfair. There are so few lesbian films out there that of course many of the ones you'll chance upon watching are bound to be boring and bad. However, some of them, while flawed, at least have something interesting about them. Maybe they show a gloriously nostalgic picture of an era, or they have such a distinctive, stylised aesthetic that you can't help but sit up and take notice. Or maybe they're basically porn. This is Bound.
Sex and violence, who's gonna make you cry?
Ah yes, Bound. This 1996 Wachowskis siblings movie was made before the two directors had broken their way into the mainstream with their oft-parodied, widely influential Matrix trilogy. The Wachowskis have a mixed reputation, but they've always wanted to create films that are slightly different from what's usually expected. And their first picture, a movie that requires me to say the word porn over and over and over again, is no exception. Well, there's nothing to do but begin. Our two main characters, Corky and Violet, are currently living in the same building, a beautiful Art Deco block of apartments. Corky is an ex-con, butch and leather-clad, and Violet is a femme fatale, with one of the most horrendous voices I've ever heard coming out of a fully grown woman.
My name's Violet. We sort of met on the elevator.
Jesus Christ, I don't know how I'm going to be able to cope with that for the rest of the film. It's like a drill bit made out of rock candy being bored directly into my eardrum. However, apparently Corky doesn't seem to mind Violet's horrendous voice, as the two are immediately attracted to each other, which we see in one of the most blatant examples of female gaze I've ever seen in a film. Corky's in the building to work on general maintenance, and is staying in the apartment next to Violet, and her gangster boyfriend Caesar. Violet is keen to make her acquaintance, and arrives at the door with coffee to... hang on a minute. Am I watching a porn?
Sorry.
Oh, no. It's not your fault. It's just the walls here are so terribly thin.
This is seriously a porn. Oh, come on! She's plumbing? Are they serious with this? Is this supposed to be stupid?
You have to let me pay you something.
I've seen porn that's less of a porn than this. Anyway, we now interrupt this porn scenario to bring you Corky going to a lesbian bar.
I'm just here to get laid.
Well, okay. I suppose I'm just watching a porn then. Oh, come on. Nobody ever watches a scenario on porn. They just skip over it to get to the... Oh, okay. However, it isn't long before the movie suddenly remembers it's supposed to be a porn scenario which somehow made its way into a mainstream theatrical release, and Corky is summoned to Violet and Caesar's apartment in order to help Violet with some plumbing. And then we're once again thrown headfirst into the porn universe, this time for real. It only took 10 minutes to get to this scene. 10 minutes. That has to be some kind of record. I swear most porn movies take longer than that. However, before the scene is allowed to reach full climax, the two are suddenly interrupted by the arrival of clueless gangster Caesar, who introduces himself to Corky, while seemingly not noticing that her hand is probably more than a little damp. Maybe he's just used to people's nervous, sweaty handshakes or something. Anyway, later, Violet goes to talk to Corky in her truck. Because of course Corky has a truck. She used it to drive here straight from Cliché Land. I'm willing to bet the glove box is full of Y-fronts and everything. And take 2 for the sex scene. And take 3.
I can see again.
So if masturbation ruins your vision, sex cures it? What the fuck kind of line is that supposed to be? Now that they've got the sex out of the way, Violet and Corky are now free to actually talk to each other, and they have a meaningful discussion about sexuality.
I know what I am. I don't have to have it tattooed on my shoulder.
That's what he's saying. They don't have sex with men.
I don't.
For Christ's sake, Violet. I heard you. Thin walls, remember?
What you heard wasn't sex.
What the fuck was it?
Work. You made certain choices in your life that you paid for. You said you made them because you were good at something and it was easy. You think you're the only person that's good at something? We make our own choices, we pay our own prices. I think we're more alike than you care to admit.
Then, for some reason, Corky is a jerk about Violet being a sex worker, and Violet is a jerk back because, Franklin Street! An escapee from Blue Velvet gets out of the car, thus confirming this movie's general status as Lynch with a head injury. Speaking of head injuries, some poor bastard is currently adding to their collection as we speak. This hapless man is Shelley, presumably a snitch. Oh well, let's interrupt that scene with footage of Violet making a water smoothie. The thugs interrogate Shelley, but for some reason they leave the towel in his mouth, even though they presumably want him to be able to actually answer the questions. Maybe they've all got head injuries. Meanwhile, Violet goes to talk to Corky, saying she's sick of being Caesar's arm candy and living in fear from the kind of people who dole out head injuries like Jehovah's Witnesses do leaflets. The two of them decide to steal the mob's money and concoct a highly elaborate plan in order to do so. Caesar returns with the money in question, but unfortunately it's covered in red paint, thus necessitating a cleaning job. I would have thought that American money would absorb blood, or even red paint, seeing as it's a cloth and paper construction, unlike the impervious construction of Australian polymer notes, but I suppose the image of literally laundering banknotes to crisp pallor instead of yellowed oak brown was too good to pass up. I'll give the Wachowskis this much. It is a pretty cool image. Corky and Violet begin implementing their plan, which is helpfully explained with tandem narration and visuals.
Where will you be?
I'll be waiting in the apartment next door.
Waiting for what?
For the shower. That's gonna be our signal. When he's done with the shower, you'll go to the bar.
The first step is to frame trigger-happy Johnny, the mafia leader's son, for stealing the money, and by extension frame Gino, the mafia leader as well. However, Caesar does not react the way they expect, and when the mobsters arrive, a panicked Caesar shoots them in ludicrous slow-mo. Did I mention that this film was simply an exercise for the Wachowskis to hone their skills so that they could create The Matrix? Unfortunately, Caesar now has to hide multiple bodies. Never a nice task at the best of times, but made even more complex by the fact that police are scurrying up to the flat as fast as their law enforcement legs can carry them. Thankfully for Caesar, the cops don't manage to notice the squelching rug and accept Caesar's Knight Rider-esque explanation about his deafness, and thus they are no longer a threat for the rest of the movie. No, the main threat is Caesar himself. He discovers Violet is involved in the plot, forcing Corky to come and rescue her. Unfortunately, this only results in Corky being in danger as well. And of course, we have some homophobia, just to reinforce the point that Caesar is terrible.
Wake up. Wake up, you fucking dyke.
But just when it looks like Caesar has the upper hand permanently, the femme half of the couple turns out to be Corky's saviour, killing him and also managing to weasel her way out of the retribution of the mob. The two of them, having managed to survive their own movie and end it still together and still gay, more or less drive into the sunset, causing lesbians all over the world to triumphantly fist pump in unison. Bound is undoubtedly a very silly movie. The acting is over the top, much of the writing and delivery is highly eroticised to the point of parody, and the first part of the movie is basically a porn scenario that somehow found its way into a feature film.
What are you doing?
Isn't it obvious? I'm trying to seduce you.
However, there's much to recommend about this movie. For one thing, Bound has a different understanding of queer female sexuality to many other films on offer. Corky and Violet are both assuredly queer. They begin a relationship very early on, and at the end of the film, they are the only ones who manage to survive the ravages of the plot.
You know what the difference is between you and me, Violet?
No.
Me neither.
The movie is unashamedly sexual, and naturally appeals to those who like to watch attractive women touching each other, but there's something here that sets Bound apart from other depictions of lesbian sexuality in mainstream film. For one thing, Corky and Violet own their sexuality. They aren't in any way passive, they're active characters and they're active sexually, sometimes to the point of parody. While I ridiculed the film for borrowing elements from porn, some of the elements that are borrowed from the world of adult film are actually refreshing to see in a mainstream movie. Sex here is casual, natural and enjoyable, and happens without much fuss. Neither Corky or Violet agonise about their sexual interactions, have an identity crisis, or feel the need to worry about how they're feeling. They simply do it because it feels good, and there doesn't have to be another reason than that.
There's one thing I can't stand is women who apologize for wanting sex.
I'm not apologizing for what I did. I'm apologizing for what I didn't do.
Before, when I've compared sexuality to pornography, it hasn't been a positive comparison. However, the depictions of sex in this movie have several good points. Unlike many movies, which are content to show women vaguely writhing on top of each other and touching each other's breasts, the Wachowskis enlisted the advice of queer sexual advocate Susie Bright, and thus showed Violet and Corky touching each other in a way actually approaching a reality that exists outside the world of depictions of lesbian sex created and marketed entirely to men. The Wachowskis also strongly resisted pressure to change the character of Corky into a man and make the story a heterosexual one, as well as advice to downplay the mechanics of the sex depicted. If you accept the campy nature of the premise and are able to deal with Violet's drill voice, the sex scene is probably one of the best displays of lesbian sexuality depicted in a mainstream movie, even now, nearly 20 years later. I'm not sure whether to be impressed or depressed. As well as wearing its sexuality on its sleeve, Bound also achieved some other victories. The film has a memorable visual aesthetic, some of it heightened to comic book levels, which elevates it beyond simply being a straightforward picture. One can truly see the promise of the Wachowskis in this film. They're directors who don't always make the best decisions, but at least they don't always fall back on what's cliched or tried and true. And for that, they deserve some recognition. I'm not sure how much Lana Wachowski's identity as a queer woman would have influenced Bound's themes and content, as the film was created before her transition, but it's interesting to consider the film's focus on female pleasure, and how that might relate to Lana's identity. However, as I'm neither trans nor a Wachowski, I'm not going to make assumptions one way or another. So should you watch it? Definitely. This film is fun and silly and sexy and violent, and has characters you don't usually see, portrayed differently to how one usually sees them. The porn aesthetic won't work for everyone, so it's probably best to avoid watching this film with anyone who's quick to blush. So that was Bound. And now, if you'll excuse me, I've got to go. I've got rather a lot of DIY to get round to.